Have you ever really thought about where a simple nickname comes from? Well, today we're going to dig into a piece of American history that's been hiding in plain sight. We're about to uncover the surprising and almost completely forgotten story behind a single word you've probably heard 1,000 times.
Okay, so let's jump right in with a question that has puzzled historians and linguists for literally centuries. If you're from Indiana, you're a Hoosier. Simple, right? But what does that word actually mean? Where did it come from?
Now, there are tons of theories out there, everything from riverboatmen to bar fights and someone asking, "Who's here?" But the most compelling theory, it doesn't point to a place or some random event. It points to a person, a man whose incredible story has been almost totally erased from the very word he may have inspired. So let's meet him. This is our central figure. He was a man who, against every single odd, rose from the deepest depression to absolutely captivate a nation with nothing but the power of his voice. This is Harry Hosier, often known as Black Harry. Born into slavery around 1750, he was completely illiterate, couldn't read or write a single word his entire life. But what he did have was a brilliant mind, an incredible memory, and a gift for speaking that was about to shake the very foundations of American religion.
And don't just take my word for it. The praise he got was, well, it was extraordinary. We're not talking about some minor figure here. Thomas Coke, one of the first bishops of American Methodism, said that this illiterate former slave was one of the best preachers in the entire world. Just let that sink in for a minute. It's a staggering testament to Hosier's power. You see, he wasn't just a preacher. He was a full-blown phenomenon. They called him the African Wonder because they had never seen anything like him. He drew these huge crowds with both black and white listeners hanging on his every word. In fact, many people said they'd rather listen to him than to the bishops he traveled with. He broke incredible barriers, becoming the first African American to preach to a white congregation. He was even there at the very conference that founded the Methodist Church in America. This guy was a big deal.
So what was his secret? How was he so powerful? To really understand that, we have to look beyond the man himself and into the unique cultural and spiritual tradition his preaching came from. This wasn't just religion as people knew it. It was a whole new form of sacred speech being born.
This brings us to a really deep cultural root that enslaved Africans carried with them, the concept of nomo. It's a West African belief that the spoken word isn't just for, communicating. It holds a sacred, creative power. The belief is that words themselves can shape reality. So preachers like Hosier's were seen as channels for this power, like poets whose words could literally change the world.
So what happened was this incredible collision of worlds. Enslaved Africans didn't just passively adopt the Christianity taught to them. No way. They took these new concepts, Jesus, the Bible, the doctrine of hell, and they merged them. They fused them with their own cosmology, a world with a supreme creator, with intermediary spirits, and a deep belief in the power of oral tradition. The result was something totally new, a faith that spoke directly to their suffering and their powerful hope for liberation. But, and this is a huge but, this powerful new spiritual movement was born right in the middle of a deep and troubling conflict. A kind of moral civil war was brewing at the very heart of the Methodist Church itself. You see, the founder of Methodism, a guy named John Wesley, was a fierce abolitionist. He was totally clear on this, calling slavery irreconcilable with any kind of justice or mercy. So the church's original moral compass was set to be staunchly anti-slavery.
However, here in America, things started to change, and fast. The church ran headfirst into the immense economic power of the plantation system, and, well, it compromised. What started as a firm command in 1784 to end slavery became just a suggestion, if practicable, by 1800. And by 1824, that moral imperative was just gone, replaced with this weak idea to just educate the enslaved. The church basically folded.
Because of this deep-seated racism and segregation, Black Methodists like Richard Allen, who, by the way, was at that same 1784 conference with Hosier, were literally pulled from their knees while praying in so-called white churches. Can you imagine? They were forced to leave and form their own denominations, like the AME Church, just to worship with dignity and freedom.
Okay, so let's bring all these pieces together. We have a famous preacher, a powerful and emotional new religious movement, and this intense social and moral conflict raging on the American frontier. Now, I think we can finally solve the mystery we started with.
So how does all of this lead to the name for an entire state? We have the context now. A famous, powerful preacher with a really distinct style,
a new religious movement that was seen as kind of strange by some, and a society just deeply divided over race and slavery.
Right, here's the theory. Methodist preachers on the frontier were already seen as a bit crude and zealous by the more established groups. Harry Hosier, with his unique, emotional, powerful style, was the most famous of them all. So, as his followers and other preachers who adopted his style spread across the frontier, it's believed that opponents started calling them Hoosiers as an insult, a way of saying, oh, there goes one of those followers of that man Hosier.
And when we look at the early uses of the word, this lines up perfectly. Hoosier was not a term of endearment. Not at all. It was an insult, a catch-all term for what some people considered crude, uneducated, and maybe a little too religious frontier folk. Exactly the kind of people who followed these Methodist circuit riders.
But then, something really fascinating happened. As these people, these so-called Hoosiers, pushed westward and settled the new state of Indiana, the name stuck. And over time, they did what so many groups do. They took the insult and they wore it as a badge of honor, reshaping its meaning into a title of pride and good-natured identity.
And that is the incredible hidden story. The nickname for an entire state, a name now associated with basketball and Midwestern pride, very likely originated with an extraordinary black man, a former slave who could not read but who stood for morality and freedom and became one of the greatest orators of his time.
And it just goes to show you, language isn't static. It's a living archive. And sometimes it hides the most incredible stories of faith, conflict, and identity right there under our noses, just waiting to be rediscovered.